Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we uncover the leadership life hacks that help you to experience breakout performance faster and rocket to success. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert, and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbaugh.
Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because I have somebody on the show today who's going to give us a much better perspective on something that so many organizations struggle with. Chris Dyer was born and raised in Orange County, California. He has 2 younger brothers and his parents are still together. Growing up, his parents created many opportunities for the brothers to travel and play, all while giving them a great deal of independence. Chris claims today's helicopter parents might faint if they watched his childhood unfold. He hung out with the adults, learned from neighbors, made new friends at the campground, and in many ways had to fend for himself. With 3 boys at the dinner table, there was never enough food, not because his parents didn't try, but because boys' appetites seemed to be unquenchable. As Chris entered high school, his abilities to navigate situations independently thrust him into leadership roles. Chris was captain of the water polo, soccer, and swim teams. He was class president, and he served in a leadership role with the school all 4 years. Involved in drama, computers, and anything related to school spirit, his ability to learn and lead served him well. Chris's early career started in college as he coached hundreds of children in competitive swimming. After he graduated, he held a few key jobs and then started his own company in 2001. Chris Dyer is the founder and CEO of People G2, a background check and intelligence firm based in California, and the author of the book, The Power of Company Culture. He is a host of the live radio show Talent Talk on OC Talk Radio and iHeartRadio. An in-demand speaker on company culture, remote workforces, employee engagement, and a frequent contributor to Forbes, Inc., HR.com, and the Society for Human Resource Management, and more. Chris still lives in Orange County, California, married to his high school sweetheart, Jody, and adopted 3 children from Russia, Luba, Dmitry, and Vladimir. Chris Dyer, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
I'm ready. Let's go.
I'm glad you're here. Now, I've given my Legion a little bit about you, but can you share what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
Yeah, my current passion right now is really talking about the book and company culture and really trying to help employers and employees have a better, basically a better work day, right? If you got to go to work every day, you might as well love it. You might as well be effective, and you might as well have a relationship with your employer that you love.
So speaking of a relationship with the employer, with a lot of the work that you guys do at People G2, I mean, how do you actually see that manifest itself with the clients that you're working with?
Yeah, so there's an odd kind of mix here between our core work and then the work that I do more from a thought leadership standpoint. So my core business is background checks, and we are really focused. Our purpose is to try to make the world a slightly safer place. We look at stopping that sex offender from getting that job at a daycare center, right? And you would think that would never happen, that they would never even try, and yet they do. They're like, it's like a magnet for them, right? Or keeping that person who's been embezzling money from having access to your money or your stocks or whatever it may be. And so that's a really important thing that we do. And we feel like that helps create that environment where the right people are getting the right jobs. On a personal level, actually, I think that most people should be eligible for jobs. Our business is not about keeping people from getting jobs. It's about ensuring that the right person is in the right job and that the wrong person is not in the wrong job. That's going to cause a problem.
Well, I think that's a really interesting clarifying point that you just made at the end, because I guess for me, as somebody who's been, part of, using an organization such as your own, that's not the perception that we typically may get, right? It's right. More so of, something that has the negative connotations to it. But I appreciate you actually seeing the positive side to it as well. And I also think that when you start looking at the 7 pillars of culture success that you have outlined in the book, there for the most part are some positive things, and there's a negative that got flipped into a positive. We'll talk about that in a second. But many of these things seem like they're just, everybody should know them. They're common sense. I mean, why these 7 pillars?
Right. So I went back and, I really realized we had a big problem in 2008, 2009, and the recession hit, and was obvious that this was a great moment for me to work on the company, maybe reinvent the company, because we had a lot of time on our hands. Wasn't a whole lot of orders coming in. Business was down. We had a lot of time to reflect. And so I took that time to say, let's make the company better. We know the recession is not going to stay forever. At some point, things are going to get better. When it does, I want us to be the best version, because I noticed everybody else was laying off their best people. They were, cutting everything they could. And when the recession started to shift, they weren't ready to take advantage. We were, because we were back in, sharpening our swords and, doing our Rocky montage, right? We were getting ready for when it was really time to jump back in. And I realized that there wasn't a great kind of blueprint for what is a great company culture. Do I have to go and try to be exactly Google? Do I have to go, hunt down the CEO of Zappos and do a mind meld with him? I mean, how do I go from where I am today to being a great company culture? And it really set me on this path, right? To learn, to read, to ask as many questions of really smart people who I admired, who are killing it, what they did, how they did it. And then that led me to the radio show and sort of interviewing these people on a more formal basis. And I came to this conclusion that there are the best companies, right? The ones who are doing really well, that we all admire, that are in the newspaper all the time, that everyone wants to work for. They're doing these 7 things. Maybe they use a different vocabulary. Maybe there's they don't quite say it the same way, but they all do these 7 things really, really, really well. And that's what makes them great. It's not ultimately what they do with it. So if we say transparency is pillar number 1, right? We start with transparency. Not everyone is transparent in the same way. They don't apply it the same way, but it is important to their company, and they find a way to talk about it and to make it work for them. And how it works for them is different. It's how it works for their a company down the street, but because they are intentionally thinking and talking about it, that's what's important.
So then going down the rest of the list, you have positivity. I think that's so important, because for me, I always see people focus on the negative side, and especially when you start even talking about the strategic planning process, and people using a SWOT analysis, for example. I mean, first of all, the acronym itself, going through the public education system at my age, SWOT meant something that really wasn't good. Plus, you're also talking about your weaknesses and threats, and everybody just, focuses on that too much. Matter of fact, there was a study that came out that said 85% of the discussion that happens in the boardroom is all negative threat-based talk. Well, if you're spending all that time on negativity, what are you actually generating? You're generating more negativity. You're giving it fuel.
Right.
So how does a company actually make that switch especially when you start talking about a legacy company? It's easy for us to say, okay, we're going to start anew, but you really can't do that. I mean, you have to transform. How do you go from that negative state to having more positivity?
So actually being a positive workforce, a positive company is very much about the vocabulary and the approach. At some point, you are going to have to talk about, weaknesses and threats and things like that. That's going to come up. But to your point, if you are starting with a focus of the positive or what we're doing, so I like to say, what are we doing well? We get into a meeting and we're having an issue internally. The first thing I'll try to bring everyone back to earth, right? What are we doing well? What's working? Let's start there, right? We get everyone baselined there. We know what's working. We know what we're doing well. Now, the average company or the average person would say, what's the problem? Or let's problem solve, or let's deal with this difficult thing. And what we say is, where's our opportunity to get better? Where's our opportunity to help enlighten or to show someone what they really need to know, right? And when you just phrase it that way, it's amazing how different the whole story changes. As opposed to, I have someone internally that likes to say, oh, this is a difficult client. And I'm like, no, I go back and say, no, this is a helpful client, because they tell us when we don't do things right. They are vocal about their displeasure. They're vocal about things that they want changed. And that's the only way we're going to get better, right? Is if we have that kind of vocal client, as opposed to someone who says nothing, who doesn't tell you and then just leaves you and goes to your competitor because they don't want a conflict.
So the other pillars that are part of the actually culture success are measurement, acknowledgement, uniqueness, listening, and mistakes. And instead of going into those, there's something else that you had in the book to me that just stood out. And I think it was so important for us to discuss. And that is what you call the levels of understanding. And you refer to it down at the individual level. But what do you really mean by that levels of understanding?
So levels of understanding is a nice little, XY axis we could build here, but not to terrorize anybody with thoughts of algebra. But essentially, if you imagine the diagonal line going from it's low on the left and it's getting up and higher to the right. And if I came to you and said, "Hey, I've got an idea for a business. Do you want to invest?" You'd probably say, "I need to know a little more there, Chris." I mean, your answer should be no, right? If I just walk up to you and say, "Give me money, I have an idea," right? You know. And yet, if you look at that example, we often go to employees and say, "I need you to do this thing." And we don't tell them why. We don't explain. We don't give them the background. We don't share with them anything. We just say, instead of doing it this way, you got to do it this way now. And they're like, "Well, why?" No, you don't get to know that. That's the board level. That's boardroom. You just got to do it. And then you get resistance because, of course, you get resistance. They don't understand why. There's no good reason for it. They like doing it the way they're doing it. And you're going to have conflict internally. You're going to have unhappy employees. So when we give people more information and we help them understand more and more of why we want the change, you get more and more acceptance. You get passive acceptance. You give them a little more information, you might get actual acceptance. They really deeply understand and are passionate about whatever it is you're asking them to do or to think about. You may even get them to be champions. You may get them to be so excited about it, they're going to go around telling everyone else in the company they should change. So I find this is all about information. It's all about training and conversations. One of the really big discoveries or really big things that a lot of, it's Gallup or the Harvard Business Journal, all these incredible surveys that have been and data that's been done about employee engagement. The number one thing they keep coming back to that makes people happy and engaged in their workforce is that they were heard. It's not getting paid more money. It's not a pizza party. It's not, all these other things that people think about. It's just, was I heard? And often that's a part of this level of understanding. I'm going to tell you why we want you to do this. This is why it's important. Giving them that opportunity to tell you how they feel, what's going on. Instead of pushing the green button, you start pushing the red button. Let's just make it super simple. And then they say, why? Well, if you push the green button, now this is going to happen. So explaining why. But if I don't do the green button, then you have a conversation. The person gets to be heard. And ultimately, this is the opportunity for the people on the top, right? The boardroom, the CEO, the senior level management, to get the important information back to them that maybe some of their decisions were stupid, right? Maybe the people at the top don't always make perfect decisions and don't always know everything they need to know and are asking people internally to do things that don't make a lot of sense. So you have that two-way street, you have that conversation, you make sure they understand, you're going to understand them better, and you're going to be able to enact change much quicker.
Yeah, and I really like the way that you laid it out. So, I mean, what you essentially were just talking through within, me looking right now at the levels of understanding table, it's saying from an individual understanding perspective, moving to and understanding what the potential engagement may be from that, and then also the level of support that you're going to get from those individuals, right? So if there's no understanding on the individual's part, they're more than likely going to be oppositional. They're not going to be neutral. They're going to be oppositional. And you're not going to get any support from them. You're going to get the resistance and the friction like you're talking about. And then the next step you go into, well, they're unaware. So they just really don't know all the details. They may know something about it, right? They're going to be indifferent and they're going to be neutral. Moving all the way up to going to cognizant, knowledgeable, and then at deep insight. And to me, it's also one of those things going back to the pillars that you'd have to incorporate. So if we're going to help with the levels of understanding, the positivity is the main focus, right? Now, we're going to talk about, we've tried things like this before and we've made some mistakes. So that's taking some of the negativity and flipping it into a positive. So there's a lot of ways that you can incorporate those pillars into this level of understanding and really work at that change process and hopefully have it be bi-directional, right? So we're doing bottom up and then we're also doing top down, and that will ultimately will help with your transformation process.
Absolutely. When you can add that in there, it adds so much to your company. Just that simple process of, can I be transparent and explain to you? Can we measure this? Can we have a conversation? Can we make sure that everybody's heard? And you just slow down for just a moment. I forget where I heard this statement, but sometimes you have to slow down to speed up. And that is really true when it comes to change, when it comes to asking employees to do things differently or to enact something new inside of an organization. You got to slow down and get everybody on board. And then, man, does things speed up really quickly once everyone's there.
Okay, so I think you just described where the Fast Leader Show comes from. And in that, it's not about shortcuts. It's not about, making, hacks that will, take steps out. What it's about is slowing down, doing the right things, and that's how you get your velocity.
Right.
So thanks for sharing that. Now, what we're talking about here, the transformation process, being able to, really, make these changes within individuals and individuals all the way, from the front line all the way up to the top of the organization. There's a lot of, passion that does go into it, a lot of energy that we need. And one of the things that we focus on in the show are quotes to help us give some of that. Is there a quote or two that you like that you can share?
So one of my favorite people is Betty Davis. She's just an ornery, funny lady. And I remember hearing this quote from her, and it's always stuck with me, which was, attempt the impossible in order to improve your work. And it's just a reminder that you have to, I struggle with this concept of crawl, walk, and run. And then I've heard it a lot. And I think there's some Six Sigma stuff around that. But that's never really worked for me. It's more like the jump off the cliff, Go do the thing that scares you. Go do the big thing you're not prepared for. Take on the client there's no way in the world you should be able to service, and figure out how to do it, right? Take the big leap. Now, maybe if my organization was as big as Google or something, maybe I would need to change that. But for now, I like just going after the impossible. That's how we grow. That's how we get better. That's how we find new and awesome things to do, as opposed to this tiny little incremental changes.
So, talking about that, risk and jumping off and all that. And, we often talk about humps that we have to get over. But, I have to say, Chris, reading your bio, being a captain on many sports teams, being part of, student government, being and starting your business at an early age and having success. I mean, man, have you really had any humps to get over, Chris?
Absolutely. Every day I've screwed it up too many times to even remember. And I think what people need to remember is that they have to be prepared for failure. You have to be prepared to have mistakes and have that, parachute or that, cushion at the bottom of the building if you don't make the jump, right? That you can't forget about what happens if, but you need to take those leaps and those risks. I mean, I could have kept working at a very steady job, working for somebody else. And in 2001, right after 9/11, 2 months after, I quit my job and started a business in the middle of a recession after the, biggest terrorist attack in American history. That was probably the riskiest thing I've ever done, but I knew when I watched those planes hit those towers that I did not want to spend the rest of my life working for somebody else and hating my work. I hated where I worked. I hated what I was doing. I took inspiration from tragedy and said, I want to go do something that I love to do and do what I've been dreaming of and not waste my life. And then, of course, I made sure I had a backup plan, right? If it didn't work out, how was I going to eat? How was I going to survive? I rented out every room in my house so I could pay the mortgage. I did other things to make sure I wasn't going to end up in a cardboard box on the street, but I took the risk nonetheless.
Okay, so I'm sure, like with many of us, when you start talking about just jumping and doing all of that, there's that point at which you have that hesitation, and you have even a lot of people that are around you saying, "No, don't do it." This, that, and I mean, so for you, when you were going through that, what happened at that moment?
Well, it was a lot of a lot of sleepless nights. You worry and you second guess and you think through it and you recalculate and you pivot and you do all these things, right? Because you take that jump. And I think what people don't tell you is that in midair of that jump, you actually change directions a few times. And maybe you don't end up landing where you intended to land when you first left off that cliff. And that's okay. You figure it out as you go along. One of the biggest things, too, is to make sure if anyone who's thinking about taking a big leap or thinking about doing something like, that's scary to them, is you need to find people who can be mentors for you, who have done it, who have been successful at it. And you need to socialize with them and get their opinions. And everyone else, you need to shut the heck up. I mean, and that's the nicest way. That's not how I really wanted to say it, but that's the nicest way I'll say it here on the podcast. Because everyone else will distract from you. They will tell you no because they're too afraid to do it. And if you're going to ask your neighbor or your cousin or someone else who's never done it, who's never taken a risk in their life, they're going to tell you shouldn't. They're going to tell you no because they care about you and they want to keep you safe. And they think they're giving you the best advice to do that, but that's not going to get where you need to go. You need to talk to someone who's been an entrepreneur, who's taken the risks, who has had failure in the past too, and knows how to help you navigate that, and really use them as your guide. If I was going to go climb a mountain, I wouldn't ask my neighbor who's never climbed that mountain how to get to the top. I'd ask someone who's done it before. And yet, when it comes to business and life decisions, we often take opinions from people who've never done anything like that before and allow it to keep us down.
That's an excellent point that everybody really needs to walk away with. I mean, there's so many of these, folks out there that talk about, who you surround yourself with, who are your influencers and who you congregate with and who you listen to. And that other side that you said is so important is that the people who are closest to you are going to protect you. They have this block that they just won't be able to get over. Very few can. That they're going to want to not give you the bad news and what they see. But then also, like you said, you almost have to ask them that question: would you do it yourself? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And if they're saying no, I mean, don't take their advice.
If you're following your passion and you make sure you got that parachute, I say take the risk, and give it a try. And calculated risk. I mean, you don't want to end up losing your home and your car and your marriage and everything else. That's not a risk with a parachute, but it's you can go try your business. A lot of people start a business and they keep working their day job, right, until they get it far enough along. I mean, there's lots of ways to do it.
Well, even from inside an organization perspective, I mean, there's certain things that you may see that you want to undertake, or areas or avenues of the business that you see opportunities and personal growth, and you have to take that risk in order to be that entrepreneur, the one who's the innovator and all of that, and you can't allow things around you and people around you, and even quite frankly, looking at the organization itself and what they've done in the past to stop you. You have to keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So you got a lot of things going on. I mean, you have the kids, the book, the company. I mean, there's a whole lot of moving parts that are happening here. But when you start thinking about a goal that you have, what would be one goal?
Yeah, I'm really trying to figure out what's the right thing for me as it relates to the book. So we've written the book, and I do a lot of speaking around that. And I'm actually been doing a lot of reflection on what does that mean? Where do I want that to go? Is this something nice to have? Is this something I transition into all the time, where I do more thought leadership and write more books or do all of that? Or is this I've done this and I'm going to stick with, what I'm doing. So my goal right now is to figure that out.
And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. An Even Better Place to Work is an easy-to-use solution that gives you a continuous diagnostic on employee engagement along with integrated activities that will improve employee engagement and leadership skills in everyone. Using this award-winning solution is guaranteed to create motivated, productive, and loyal employees who have great work relationships with their colleagues and your customers. To learn more about An Even Better Place to Work, visit beyondmorale.com/better. All right, here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Chris, the Hump Day Hoedown is the part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Chris Dyer, are you ready to hoe down?
I'm ready.
All right. So what do you think is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
Probably knowledge. I feel like I can always learn more. There's always that. If you remember that movie, The Matrix, where he would sit down and they injected, do you know Kung Fu? Well, now you do, right? And learn how to fly. I mean, that's like my dream, right? That I could just have information installed in my head in a matter of seconds. So I think knowledge is one that the more I learn, the better off I am.
What is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
So I joined a CEO group a few years ago, and one day one of my mentors turned to me and said, Chris, the day I realized that I'm the CEO and it's my job to deal with the tough things, the big things, right? The big issues of the day, and started enjoying it, my whole life changed. And that perspective really changed, because I used to be upset when people would bring me these big, it was like, oh, another thing I got to deal with. But as a CEO, that's my job. That's why I get paid the big bucks. I'm supposed to deal with the big stuff. So I started enjoying it and being happy when people came to me with that, and reveling in the success of being able to help people. And that was a big shift for me.
What is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
I think follow through. I recently had on Facebook, I was talking about the book, and someone made a comment like, sort of, I do so many things. How do I do it? And someone popped in and said, oh, Chris just actually follows through. And I went, you know what? That's a really good, way to kind of categorize. I have a lot of people who dream about doing things. If I decide I want to do something and I put down as a goal and I thought it through, I follow through. And I think that's been one of the big reasons why I've been able to do the things I've done.
What do you feel is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
Books. Absolutely books. The more you can get perspectives and learning and find inspiration. As humans, we only know what we know. And when we have to make a conclusion or a decision, we only take the information that's in our head to be able to make the best conclusion or decision we can. So the more you can learn, the better decisions you can make going down the road.
What would be one book that you'd recommend to our listeners? It could be from any genre. Of course, we're going to put a link to The Power of Company Culture on your show notes page as well.
Well, thank you for shamelessly plugging my book first, so I don't have to do it. But yeah, I just recently read a book that I absolutely love. It has changed my life. It is called Work Clean. And it is this amazing kind of, if you love cooking shows or you like to know about chefs and food, if you're into that, and you also want to talk about work, productivity from a work standpoint, it's an awesome kind of marriage of the two. I realized that my messy office and my sloppy ways and my messy bag not only was a problem, but it was a problem because I didn't have an actual process. I didn't have a system. No one ever taught me how to be organized personally. I'm very organized on the computer and with my business and my goals, but personally, I'm kind of a slob. And I like things clean. I just didn't like to clean them. This book just unleashed a system for me, and my life has totally changed. I've redone my office, redone my closet, reorganized my home, and the stress level has nearly evaporated from just having clutter everywhere. So I highly recommend it.
That's definitely going to be on my shelf. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Chris Dyer. Okay, Chris, this is my last Hump Day Hoedown question. Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25. You've been given the opportunity to take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you, but you can't take everything back. You can only choose one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
So this is going to sound a little bit bad, but I think I'm going to take back stock market knowledge and go back and be able to invest correctly. I mean, but I say that in the sense that I would love to be able to, A, make a bunch of money off knowing which the right stocks are, but then B, maybe take that money and do something really great with it from a charity standpoint, knowing some of the things that have happened since that time, right? Some of the tragedies, some of the places where we could make an impact. So, I mean, I'll keep a little extra for myself and my yacht, but the rest of it we can send to charity and maybe impact, people with hurricanes and floods and all these, things that out there that we could, really impact.
Chris, it was an honor to spend time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn, Chris Dyer. You can find me on Twitter, Chris Dyer7, Facebook, Snapchat, all that. I'm sure you can find me somewhere. I'm happy to connect. And you can also go to culturedceo.com if you want to learn more about my speaking gigs or the book or anything else, or I'm sure you can find the book on Amazon. So,
Chris Dyer, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.